Hey guys, Scott here. Today I want to talk about the surrender option that is being added in a couple of weeks to Dead by Daylight. It was tested on the PTB, and I was watching a video of Choi's on it, and it brought to my attention that the way that they actually worded this is kind of disingenuous because it's not really a surrender system. It's sort of a you can avoid the disconnect penalty system. And when I initially looked at it like that, I was like, oh, that's kind of disingenuous. It's the only way I can put it, the way that they worded it, because they said it very specifically. You can use the surrender option, ending the trial while retaining the blood points they've earned. But it doesn't end the trial. It just lets you as a player leave the match. The trial keeps going. You just turn into a bot in that scenario. So I feel like the way they worded that isn't really accurate to what's actually happening. Just look at it this way. Instead of the leave game button being there, it changes to surrender when you're in a scenario where the game is basically over. So again, I'm not too happy with the way that they worded this. The way they worded this made it seem like it's going to be like, you guys vote to end the match, and then the match is over and it ends. But as we've seen, yeah, that's not the case. The real question is this really a big deal? A lot of people are very, very doomer about this. And the more I looked into it, no, it's not really a big deal at all. In fact, this might actually be even better than a vote system because a vote system, unfortunately, can be very easily abused by one guy being a dickhead. As we've seen in a bunch of games in history, there can be a very clear a conclusion of a match, and then some guy is just stubborn for some reason and just to troll his teammates won't accept it. Everyone's forced to stay in, yada, yada, yada. So I understand why, in keeping with the nature of the game, as they've admittedly said, is like a 1v1v1v1v1, not technically a 4v1 kind of thing, that the surrender would be to the individual player. And so there are a lot of concerns from killers. Like, I don't want to spend all my matches just going against bots. This allows people to just avoid, the disconnect penalty and stuff like that. And that's true if you're like four-man slugging everybody. But for most games, it's not really going to be that relevant. There's another thing, though, that they were kind of not super honest about as well. It says one of the main scenarios is if all remaining survivors have been slugged, but that's not exactly accurate, too. What it really is when all survivors have been incapacitated, sort of how the perk low profile from Ada works, where, you can have 3 people on a hook and 1 survivor walking around. That activates the perk because you're the last player left. This works when there's no players left, basically. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're slugged. They have to be on a hook or, in the dying state. So there is a scenario where it's technically someone could Kobe or something like that for like a few seconds, and someone might DC on the floor within the fourth person downed. So look, the whole thing is the risk reward of adding this type of system. Are there going to be a couple of scenarios where there potentially might have been a very small chance for a comeback? Like in solo queue, someone's got Unbreakable. You don't know they have Unbreakable. Everyone's down. You go, okay, whatever, I'm out. The game's over. Yes, I would say every once in a while, there is going to be a scenario like that where, as a survivor, you might get screwed out of a chance where maybe you could have done a little bit more because someone had a perk that you weren't aware of. So that will happen. The question is, does that detriment outweigh the benefits of being able to end matches that are obviously already over? And I think absolutely it does not. I think the benefits of this system are far greater than the few fringe scenarios where you might get robbed out of something here. And really, all of this is just against killer. In fact, or all of this is just against survivor. Really, the only thing about the system that might be annoying for killer are the scenarios where no gens have been completed for 10 minutes, which is another surrender condition, and all the remaining survivors are bots, which is another killer surrender condition. In these scenarios, it doesn't make sense that the killer surrenders. The killer should just win. Instead of having an abandoned game button or a surrender button, it should say quick victory or something like that. Because at that point, the killer obviously has won. They don't need to be punished with a surrender. They won the match. It's kind of ridiculous. Now, some people might want to stay in the match and get their dailies done or get some challenges or get more blood points against the bots and whatever, but you shouldn't be forced to stay there as well. So there should be like a quick victory button. And that's it. That's basically the only example where it can be annoying for killer in those fringe scenarios where the killer is forced to surrender instead of just win. And that's a very, very easy fix that I feel like is sort of a no-brainer that they're going to do because it's very clear in those scenarios the killer has won. Other than that, though, there's really no way to abuse this. It's not like the killer has to worry about, oh man, I had some really good momentum in the early game. I got, 3 people down at 5 gens. Everyone's going to surrender. It's like, no, even in that scenario, they still can't surrender. They can only surrender when the game is effectively over. No one has control of their character anymore. And that is the only scenario where their abandon button changes into a surrender button. So the killer's complaining about this. I think it's definitely extreme. It's way too doomer. Like the scenarios in which you're going to be annoyed by a very, fringe situation of like no one's touched a gen in 10 seconds. Oh, I got to surrender now. Which, by the way, you don't even have to surrender. Your previous options in that scenario were do nothing because you didn't even have the option. This is just, it gives you another option to just go, I don't care anymore. I just want to leave. Before, you had no options. You had to just find the survivors. So I don't see how you can see this as anything but a positive. And I think trying to spin this as a negative is, I mean, I'm occasionally doomer about the game too, but there's really not many downsides to this at all. So killers, you guys don't have to worry about the scenario where you're doing too well and you're being, everyone's a bot instead now because you were doing too well. It's not that you were doing too well if the bots appeared because the surrender became a function. It's that you won. You already won the match. And at that point, wanting to subject players to just sit on the ground until you find them and pick it up and hook them, it's almost like crossing into like psycho territory where you want the player to feel the misery of being like down on the ground there. It's like, dude, you won. Just whether it's a bot or a player, you're still going to pick them up and throw them on hook or mori them or whatever if they're the last survivor. They're going to die in the exact same way. Whether it says bot next to the name or not, the game has already ended. So there's no worry about you having to play against bots because, again, the game is over already. Now, you're still going to have people disconnecting mid-match because they're just fed up with whatever and they're going to eat the DC penalty, but that's just how the game already works. Like, this is not going to put a killer in a scenario where they have to go against 4 bots more often than it already does because you're not playing against 4 bots in that scenario. You've already won against the 4 bots. That's the main distinction you need to draw from. You're not going to have to worry about playing against 4 people that are not players because the game is over in that scenario. There's no players to play against because even if they were players, they couldn't do anything to you anyway because they're just on the ground or on the hook. They're already incapacitated. There's no other further gameplay to be had. Why continue to keep people in these matches when it's already over? So overall, I was a little annoyed that the way that they worded this, like I said, is definitely, it's disingenuous. Like, it doesn't end the trial. There's no vote to end the match. It just ends the trial for you. You are the main character. You're the center of the universe. So, again, initially when I saw that from some YouTube videos, I was like, okay, that's kind of lame of them to word it like that. But no, this is really completely fine because it only happens once the game is effectively over. Again, I reiterate for the last time that yes, 1 out of 50 games, there might be a scenario where a dude that has Unbreakable and We're Gonna Live Forever and Made for This could have picked someone up and started an anti-slugging snowball or something like that, and you're in solo queue, so you couldn't tell, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And you know what would fix that? Being able to see your teammates' perks. Crazy, right? But I can understand that. I can understand being frustrated about that. But the point is the benefits far outweigh those rare scenarios of that happening. So it's sort of a no-brainer that this whole system is overall good for the health of the game. So that's it. Those are my thoughts on it. Curious to hear what you guys have to say. That is it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.